So the ethics presentation will be divided in several parts and done jointly by 3 persons. I will talk about the question, do we know enough to implement personalized nutrition? And then Jennie Alhgren will talk about ethical issues connected to commercialization. And finally, Karin Nordström will talk about personalizing for the common good, food for me and for us, which covers, among else, questions, ethical questions around values, relations, and society. So that will be followed by a joint discussion. So I'll first start with the question, do we know enough? And we have done an investigation on this, and that has been together with, among else, John Mathers and Keith Grimaldi. And so part of the arguments are developed in cooperation with them. So what is applied ethics? This is what we have been doing here. Ethics is, to a large extent, based on creating ethical theory, looking at fine-tuning, understanding basic values. But that is the basic theoretical work which is made in ethics. A special part of ethics is the applied ethics, where we use to look at relational situations. That may be real situation, or they may be imagined situation. So, that have a need for consideration and perhaps solutions. Some of these relational situations consist of, perhaps a choice between different alternatives that both may be bad from special points of view. And that is what we often call ethical dilemmas. And the idea is to use experiences from the theoretical work to give ethical or ethically based advice. And so, do we know enough to personalize nutrition is one of these issues that we may call a dilemma. It has advantages, a choice, but it has also disadvantages. And both alternatives may have disadvantages. So there are, if we first look at the left side of this, so there is, seems to be scientific evidence is limited. We don't know, there are very, very much we don't know, even if we think we know a lot. And the effects of behavior and motivation are not well understood. I will go into this a little further. So very few relationships between diet and gene and health have been testing for causality. And knowledge is limited about the interactions between different genes, and also about the net outcome of multiple gene variants that interact with nutrition. And there is good evidence that diet and other lifestyle exposure has an impact on epigenetic factors. So to say, back to the exposure, expression of genes. But how this affects health remains poorly or only partly understood. So this is a lack or limited knowledge. And there is also a lack of knowledge how the recipient react to this. There is limited evidence how advice will be well understood, how it will create motivation, how it will result in behavior changes, and be cost-effective compared to conventional population-level interventions. So, on the other hand, on the right side, there is evidence that specific genetic variants are favorable in specific situations. And it's also, in such cases, a personalized nutrition is advisable. And I will look at 2 examples that are given by Keith Grimaldi to illustrate examples where we do certainly have a lot of evidence that the personalized nutrition advice, which is different from general population advice, is preferable. For the gene MTHFR, an increasing folic acid intake to up to 400 to 600 milligrams per day instead of the standard nutrition advice at 200 milligrams will keep homocysteine levels below the risk levels for cardiovascular diseases in most carriers of the T or TT polymorphism. And another example is the GST gene, where people with the null variants of the T1 or M1 genes are among these people, an increasing intake of cruciferous vegetables is likely to play an important role in cancer prevention for those carriers. So these are only two examples, and we have a lot of other examples, some of them weaker, and so the result of this is that it's a difficult and complex situation. How can ethics help in this situation? And that is where ethics come in as the main actor. So we suggest two kinds of approaches to this. The first is to use what we call a precautionary principle. For those of you who have some acquaintance with philosophy or ethics, you know that precautionary principles have been used and for a lot of things and for many arguments. And it has also been understood in very different ways. But what we want to do is to go back to basic and look at what was the original use of the precautionary principle. That is a way of making prudent housekeeping. So how is that done? To slightly underestimate your incomes and slightly overestimate your expenses or benefits costs relation. So this will result in a cautious estimation of the risk-benefit balance, allowing for modification. So our suggestion is that we should offer personalized dietary advice only in cases of strong scientific evidence for health benefits. And we need to follow up with a stepwise evaluation of unforeseen behavioral and psychological effects and allow for modifications during this work. The second aspect is a plea for autonomy. When in medical circumstances and often in other cases, advice in the health field is often connected with a certain amount of paternalism. Well, the doctor knows best, tells you what to do. However, this does not respect the right to decide for oneself or the need to integrate a choice within a personal value system. But if it's true that people, human beings are value-driven organisms, then you need to integrate your choice, your decision in your own value system. And because of this, our suggestion is to develop methods for nutritional advice that focus on supporting the autonomous choice of each person. That is, telling people basic information and alternative choices and assist people to make the final choices themselves. So that's what I had to say, and now I give the word to Jennie.
Det är bara att trycka på den.
Ja, så fort du vill.
Ja. Yes, hi. I will give a short presentation of one of the articles we have published, a collaboration among Food for Me people, researchers, but also external researchers external to the Food for Me project. So several studies, as we have heard here also today, have shown that consumers in large often have quite positive attitudes toward personalized nutrition based on genetic information. It seems as if the idea of managing your health using individual genetic information is appealing in different ways. Using this kind of information could be seen as empowering the individual, as a way to take control over your health and avoid or cure diseases or illnesses. Additionally, making use of personalized nutrition could also be seen as a feasible way to take responsibility over your own health. However, some ethical issues arise in relation to providing consumers with this kind of information and advice, maybe particularly when it's done over the internet. In our article, Consumers on the Internet, ethical and legal issues are examined in relation to personalized nutrition offerings over the internet. We discuss some of these issues, arguing for sufficient consumer protection throughout the whole process of testing and advice giving, from an ethical point of view as well as from a legal point of view. We have heard some of the legal points of views from Maud, so I will not go into that particularly. But in this paper, we, among else, discuss the marketing of direct-to-consumer genetic testing and argue that many of the companies online show an imbalance between quite far-reaching promises or statements on their websites and the disclaimers, the legal disclaimers they provide in the fine prints, the prints that no one really reads. And this in itself poses, you could say, a problem to consumer protection and raises the questions of what the consumer may expect from the services they actually pay for. And this kind of marketing could also limit the possibility of making well-informed and autonomous choices and decisions concerning personalized nutrition. And adding to this, of course, is the so far quite limited knowledge and understanding of the relationship between genes, diets, and health, as we also heard Ulf say. So these are some of the aspects related to consumer protection that arise in relation to personalized nutrition offerings on the internet, and that we raise in this paper. And yet another crucial aspect is maybe the absence, at least at some of the companies, of consumer guidance or consumer counseling. Getting to know your genetic self isn't always that pleasant. And it could pose problems and difficulties for the individual, for sure, in different ways. And some consumers may require help to interpret or implement the advice they are given. And so, as I mentioned before, the internet offerings here for personalized nutrition, there's a questionable, you can question the trustworthiness of the companies regarding the promises versus disclaimers provided. And there's also the question of the level of scientific advice, of course, and the absence of consumer counseling guidances. That's the main focus in the paper. And also, as mentioned before, we examined the legal aspects. I will just say a few words about that. As Maud was letting us know, regulating this area is quite difficult, since personalized nutrition is on the borderline between medicine and nutrition. And from what we have heard earlier today, different aspects of consumer protection seems to be crucial for the future of personalized nutrition. So we argue that it's really important and crucial to grab these questions. Because the consumer should not only feel safe, he or she should also be safe when making decisions or using these services of personalized nutrition that is already on the market. So that was all for me. Now I give the mic to Karin Nordström.
So. Okay, good. I hope there is still some oxygen in the room for you to be able to pay attention to one more presentation on ethical issues. The title I chose for my presentation is Personalizing for the Common Good. I'm trying to, in this presentation, to contextualize personalized nutrition. It's about the individual, but it's also about society. It's also about the social context. Therefore, I put also the subtitle Food for Me and then Food for Us. How does it affect the relationship between individual interests and social interests? So, contextualizing personalized nutrition, this is of course not an exhaustive list, but it is related to so many fields, such as public health, healthcare, health insurance, genetics, nutrition, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure that all you representing the guests today represent different areas of these social areas related to personalized nutrition. And then we've heard it in the morning also, personalized nutrition is also part of a larger context, part of a wider trend towards personalized medicine. So when we do ethics, we try to identify what is specific, what is ethically specific and relevant to a new technology or to a new approach to nutrition or to nutritional advice in that case. So we have tried to identify the core intention in terms of how it is relevant for ethical issues. This picture symbolizes the focus on the individual. So personalized dietary advice in exchange of personal health data. That is ethically a very relevant characteristic of personalized nutrition. It's in exchange. I have to give my data, otherwise it's not personalized, is it? Another relevant, ethically relevant characteristic is the identification of individuals or groups, specific conditions characterizing clusters or groups or individuals, okay? Their conditions and their risks with regard to health. So how will this influence the relationship between individual and social interests? This is the sort of approach to this question, food for me and food for us, and the common good in relation to the individualization of personalized nutrition. I don't know if you were able to read this. I realized it's quite small. I'm trying to tell you what is on the slide. In the green field, yeah, you also have it in the print. In the green field, it's personal. It's again the characteristics of personalized nutrition. It's the personal health data, and related to that in the gray on the left top corner, that's again issues of trust and trustworthiness, and I will come back to all these things. My point here is that ethically speaking, it's not so interesting to talk about trust, or it's maybe interesting but ethically not worthwhile, because ethically it's much more interesting to speak about trustworthiness, because there we can put criteria and we can address the ethical issue much better. Okay, then on the top on the right side there is the focus on prediction and prevention of health problems. This is of course part of this wider trend again of personalized medicine, the focus on prediction and prevention. We have had that before. That's nothing new to medical science, but it is a very strong emphasis on that, of course also related to personalized nutrition. And that relates ethically to categorization and apt categorization. I will come back to all these aspects. Then on the lower right-hand side, it is the significance of diet for health. We've heard a lot about that in the morning. It relates ethically to concepts of food and health. How does it affect our idea about what health is? How does it affect our concepts of food and what significance food has in our lives? And then on the left-hand side in the lower part, it's individualizing or stratifying. The approach is individualizing or stratifying in personalized nutrition. And that ethically relates to issues of social justice and solidarity. Okay, so I can also summarize what I just said now in this kind of brief overview of what issues I will address in this talk. And I also put it as opportunities and challenges, because that was also one approach in Food for Me and the ethical study of food, personalized nutrition. I asked these questions. Personalized nutrition, is it a means of empowerment? And we're back to empowerment. Maybe I will also hopefully add some to some of this, the questions we've been addressing before. I will talk about the dilemma of information and the dilemma of individualization, and then the trust and trustworthiness issue as an aspects of empowerment. Then second, personalized nutrition as a means of enhanced public health, question mark. Of course, I will not at all make a claim to answer these questions in any empirical sense, but address its ethical dimensions. Will personalized nutrition change the way we think about food and health? Food is more than nutrition, concept of health and responsibility for health. I will come back to each one of these. Personalized nutrition as a means of cost-effective health insurance and health care. Social justice and solidarity issues, and this issue of apt categorization. So I will address now each of these three sections one by one. Okay, the dilemma of individualization, we describe it in one of our papers, and you will get the references in the end of the talk. We describe it in this way: what is the relative value of individual freedom of health control compared with the interest of society with respect to initiating incentives at the population level to encourage responsible nutritional habits? That's sort of an ethical dilemma, or a dilemma of individualization. Once I get, as an individual, personalized and hopefully adequate and good information about my own personal health risks, plus ways for me to control these or manage these risks, doesn't society then also have expectations on me to actually comply with these? And what if I don't comply with the advice I actually get? So on one hand, it is empowerment, yes, the information is empowerment. On another hand, it maybe is also related to expectations of behavioral change. Then the dilemma of information, we put it this way. Okay, we put it this way in the paper. Will the value of receiving specific genetic information and related nutritional advice outweigh the possible negative effects of learning to know that one is at higher than average risk for a disease? Okay, so the dilemma of information, the right not to know, which we also have. Okay, and then I'm turning to the trust and trustworthiness issue now. As part of empowerment, trust is an essential aspect. Trust has been defined by someone as a way of managing uncertainty. Okay? If I know everything, then I don't need to trust. It's about handling uncertainty. But trust is not a very good ethical approach. It's trustworthiness, as I said before. It's impossible to enforce trust, of course, because then also we're not talking about trust anymore. But it's possible to show oneself trustworthy, and that's the point why it ethically is more interesting to look at trustworthiness. The truster should be treated as an autonomous subject. Despite asymmetries, in this complex world, I cannot understand everything. So the main question ethically, again, is not how the individual can be changed so that he or she will be able to trust, as a consumer, for example, but what conditions the trustee has to fulfill to be worthy of trust. Okay? This is work done by Frank Mayboom, who is an ethicist who has collaborated with us in one of the papers. And he says trustworthiness, the criteria of trustworthiness are composed by two basic approaches. One is the competence aspect. Do I know what I do, and do I know how I do it, the know-how? So the technical aspects of a service, a personalized nutrition service. But it's also, the other component is motivation. Why do I do it? What are my motives, of course? And I thought that was interestingly, also in the Work Package 2 presentation by the little drama, touched upon. So it's also, the trustworthiness is not just the technical know-how, it's also about the moral integrity of the institution or company who offers a service. Okay, I go now on to the second part. Will personalized nutrition change the way we think about food and health? Again, food, contextualized, relates to different aspects in our lives. Health is one aspect, but there is a social aspect, there is culture, identity, and so on and so forth. Well, personalized nutrition puts very much focus, of course, on the health aspect. Food as a means for good health or for bad health. This implies also that food is very much then dealt with as nutrition. And there is an aspect of intellectualization. Not enjoying or smelling or tasting food in cultural settings, but approaching it by nutrients and facts. And it's also, in a way, we could say an instrumentalization of food. Food as a means for good health. If it would be reduced to only that would maybe, not be a very nice idea. I don't know. So I have put these two pictures just to show you the contrast. On one hand side, on the left-hand side, you have the nutrients aspect of food, the intellectualization of it, to understand, to also, we have discussed in the project the literacy of folk, of people, how to understand these facts and how should it be easily put on labels and so on and so forth. And then on the other hand side, you have the cultural aspect of food, actually the Nobel Prize dinner in Stockholm, where food is part of a culture, in this case very special maybe, social value, relationships, identity, something which is communicated through food. Okay, now personalized nutrition as a means of enhanced public health as a question mark. We say in our paper that food is not only nutrition, and it should not be, but it is connected to social contexts, cultural values and identities. And we suggest that personalized nutrition should integrate the scientific approach with the cultural approach. And I think we also saw in the morning the menu approach you have been working with, Sylvia, is a very good example of that. It has to be related to people's preferences also and cultural settings, of course. Okay, likewise, health is not necessarily a descriptive concept. It may be seen as instrumental in relation to individual life plans. This is a perspective that turns health into a more complex and value-laden concept. Okay, and I will show you what we do in one of our other papers. We compare the biostatistical theory of health, which is basically a condition where all organs function normally, given a statistically normal environment, make at least their statistically normal contribution to the survival and reproduction. While a holistic theory of health means that the bodily and mental state is such that a person A, has the ability, given standard or otherwise reasonable circumstances, to realize all his or her vital goals. And we emphasize in our papers that in relation to personalized nutrition, this should not just be, the concept of health should not just be holistic, but also individualistic. So health is something that is a condition for a person to realize his or her vital goals, not vital goals in general. So also the concept of health should be individualized in that case. And of course that can change also over a lifespan. What is health for me when I'm 20 is maybe not the same than when I'm 70 years old. Okay, I'm coming now to the last part here. Just mentioning briefly personalized nutrition as a means of cost-effective health insurance and health care. Just reminding you of the two of the core characteristics of personalized nutrition, the stratifying objective and the focus on predictive and preventive health management. How does this affect values such as privacy and fairness? Privacy, we could say, is a function of how the predictive and preventive focus is managed in relation to data. The use of data, the eventual reuse of data, its communication, and so on and so forth. And fairness then, due to the stratifying objective, we could say, of personalized nutrition, is a function of solidarity, how it is understood and organized. Okay. Now, solidarity, to put it a bit in a trivial way maybe, used to be in a health care system and medical sphere where we didn't know so much about personal risks and couldn't predict them in the way we can and will more and more be able to. Solidarity used to be, the cohesion of a society with unforeseeable risks and presuppositions. Okay, I didn't know, we didn't know about personal risks in comparison to others, so we shared the risks. Okay, and ignorance is the presupposition for mutual benefit, you could say. Now, in a society or in a time where we can predict a lot of risks, solidarity will have to be the loyalty of those groups with low risks with those with high risks. Okay? And that's ethically a different approach. Known risks are creating different groups, and solidarity demands, I would say, a higher moral standard. To put it in ethical terms, the principle of altruism has to replace the principle of reciprocity. Okay, therefore, categorization is inevitable and will be inevitable. We need criteria for apt categorization. It's not the question of if we want to categorize, but how. And just to briefly focus back on the overall theme of my talk here is to show you this scale, that on one side we have, incentives and benefits and distributive justice on the other. It's also a balance about private initiatives and state regulation when it comes to mandatory health insurance, for example. It's a balance between transparency of information on one hand and data protection on the other, about individual autonomy and solidarity, just to sort of give you the overview again. Okay, apt categorization. This work is done by Stephen John, who is an ethicist also. And I think it's very useful, and we apply it in our work with personalized nutrition in the project. He says, he gives this list, and it's not new in the sense, but it's very applicable to the personalized nutrition issue. Is the end and the purpose of the categorization permissible? That is the sort of entrance into the question, when we categorize, how should we do it? And then he says we should assess the reasonability of the categorization scheme by, for example, asking about its empirical robustness. And that, of course, also relates to what Ulf Görman just said. It's possible deleterious knock-on effects. And also its possible endorsement or perpetuation of past or ongoing injustices by the use of the scheme. And also the intelligibility of the scheme to those categorized by it. And that includes both those benefiting and those who are not benefiting by categorization. Okay, so how is the acceptability of distribution of costs and benefits? That, of course, is the ultimate then criteria. So this set of criteria would be one way of approaching sort of the fact that we are categorizing risks and have to manage them. Okay, this is my last slide now. To summarize the ethical challenges within a social perspective, a social justice perspective, we say in one of our papers that it is vital to discern between controllable and uncontrollable health risks and diseases. Okay, so when we opt, for example, for incentives to really make people change their lifestyle behavior and dietary behaviors, then we should still discern between risks we can actually manage and risks we can't manage. So ethically, it is important to combine incentives with also a concept of social justice and fairness. And also there should be a balance, we say, between individual autonomy and social interests to stimulate healthy lifestyles and food consumption patterns in order to manage controllable health risks. These are the references to the papers I have been referring to. Thank you very much.